What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I have yet another probably long collection update for you guys. Yeah, I've been trying to like bullet train these and kind of get caught up with all the stuff that I bought, but it's paying off because I think I only got like one more stack after this, and then I am like completely caught up, which is good because this features a lot of new releases that we didn't get a chance to go over, plus some stuff I picked up at Dark Descent. We also got some stuff that I picked up at Heavy Hell, as well as Full Terror Assault on here. Got some Metalhead box stuff, and even some stuff I snagged at the Narcotic Wasteland show that we kind of helped put together down in Bowling Green, Ohio. So needless to say, we have a lot of stuff to go over, so let's just get right down to it. Ageless Summoning, Corrupting the Entempled Plane. This is the debut album from this UK death metal act. Actually features members from all over the UK. We have members from Northern Ireland, we have members from England, we have members from Scotland. This one was definitely recommended to me in the comments quite a few times. I saw it in Dark Descent's distro, decided to pick it up. And if I remember right, the comment said this was some fierce Morbid Angel worship, and it definitely is. Like, you have all the hallmarks of Morbid Angel on here. Tremolo riffs that are just nasty and harmonized, blast beats, slow, sludgy songs, big gravelly vocals, twisting leads, and weird atonal riffs every now and then. Yeah, it's Morbid Angel, and pretty much everyone on this channel knows I love Morbid Angel. You have lots of dissonant melodies like on Epoch of Souls and Retribution Eternal, but lots of great chuggy triplet breakdowns, especially on Epoch of Souls, man. There's just an absolutely savage breakdown on there. The lead work is very much in line with what Trey does. Lots of dive bombs and squeals, but also very technical at the same time. The title track is definitely a big standout for me. I absolutely love the tremolo harmonies. The breakdowns on it are fucking savage as hell. As well as Among the Worms, it is a more slow, brooding song, like kind of more in line with songs like God of Emptiness, Where the Slime Lived. Actually, they could have called it Where the Ageless Lived, and it would have been perfect. The lumbering riffs and chugs on that with a slower beat, but still, you know, lots of fantastic double bass work because, you know, this is definitely some Morbid Angel worship, and you kind of have to have that. If I was going to knock this on anything, I would say production-wise, I think the vocals and guitars really dominate the mix, and the bass is very indistinct. At times, the vocals can be a little bit loud, but overall, I mean, this has just got riff after riff. It sounds evil, it sounds sinister as hell. And while they're definitely a little bit transparent as to who they're worshiping on here, they do it so damn well. This is an absolutely killer release. If you're a big fan of Morbid Angel, Gorephilia, Skeletal Remains, definitely check this out. This is an absolutely monstrous release. Cloak, Black Flame Eternal. This is the third album from this Atlanta-based black metal act. I've been a fan of this band since their debut to Venomous Depths. I thought The Burning Dawn was even better, and I'll be honest, I think this might be their best one yet. I think it's also one of their heaviest, but also just catchier than hell. This band does a very dynamic style of black metal bordering on black and death metal. It is very riff-centric, lots of layered melodies. At times it can sound a little bit more like Hypocrisy, albeit played through like a blackened filter. Lots of atmosphere, lots of groove, and lots of dynamics. This isn't like a blast and tremolo fest. In fact, I would say it's kind of similar to Dissection in a lot of ways, where it's very riff-oriented, it's sinister, it's dark, but it's also very catchy. Like, the melodies really jump out. The vocals are exceptional. You even have some clean chanted vocals every now and then. And the melodic aspects of this are also very dynamic. You have more like melancholy songs like Shadowlands, where it feels somber and dirgy. That even includes some like almost chanted clean vocals that really just catch the move, kind of gives it a little bit of a doomy edge. But then you have Eye of the Abyss, which sounds very triumphant. It feels like it's galloping into battle. There's even some good thrashier moments in songs like Invictus, Seven Thunders, and The Holy Dark. Ramps up the energy, kind of just gets angry instead of just evil for a moment. And then Heavenless is kind of a surprise, as like it's a acoustic kind of transitional track, but it's not one that I would skip. It actually is a nice little break before you get into the giant-sized title track on here. Honestly, a lot of this kind of feels like a much heavier Tribulation. Like, if you took their sound now and added like a much heavier aspect, like a flat-out like blackened death metal aspect to it, because they're a little bit more like the goth rock side now, which is not a complaint. I fucking love that band. But this kind of feels like this would have been like a step between the first two albums if this was Tribulation. But yeah, I love everything about this album. I really don't think it has a weak track. The lead work is solid, the vocals are great. awesome drums. The production is fucking stellar. Yeah, I can't think of anything really negative to say about this, which is problematic because I'm still, building a year-end list, and stuff like this keeps squeaking in consideration. But yeah, this honestly might be their best one yet. And if you've been a longtime Cloak fan, I'm pretty sure you already got this. But again, if you're a big fan of like Dissection, Tribulation, albeit like heavier, definitely check this out. This is an absolutely amazing album. All right, we got a pair here from Morpheus Descents. We have their lone full-length album, Ritual of Infinity, and their 1994 EP, Chronicle of the Shadowed Ones. Now, this is a band I've been meaning to check out for a while, though finding OG copies of this is pretty damn tough if you don't want to pay like an arm and a leg for them. But luckily, the good people at Dark Descent have decided to reissue these, and I immediately pounced on them, and also pounced on Ageless Summoning while I saw that in the distro too. So now I finally get to check out this underground, legendary New York death metal band that was maybe a little bit short-lived, but still actually plays some live shows now, I believe. This band has gone through a lot of breakups and reformations. I know that the drummer, Sam Azera, is the live drummer for Mortician, so I mean, he's still firmly in the New York death metal scene as well. And again, I believe this band is around at least in a live capacity right now, but I don't know if they're going to record anything new. Anyway, Ritual of Infinity. This was the one that I was mainly after here because I've heard so many people talk about this, and this is some legit badass old school New York death metal. Riffy as hell, lots of groove, a really cool balance of bands like Immolation, Baphomet, and then, well, it's not New York, Mortiscald. Actually, it reminded me a lot of Mortiscald. It's definitely more groove oriented, like you have blasty sections, but they're just like smaller pockets. A lot of this just kind of sticks to like groove and chug. Lots of vicious breakdowns, especially on songs like Immortal Coil, Trepanation, and Accelerated Decrepitude. You do get like a little bit more like thrash kind of injected in their sound, especially on Enthralled to Serve. But overall, I just flat out dug this. This is just riffy, old school 90s death metal. I will say production's a bit of an issue, and there is a good reason. This album was recorded at multiple studios at different times, so they had different mixes on certain tracks. I believe some of the stuff on here was actually recorded from old demos when they were just called Morpheus too. So it is kind of similar to like Slowly We Rot in a way, where you have extra tracks that sound different because they were recorded separately. But overall, yeah, this is just a fucking banger. Like if you love old school death metal, I mean, I can't see why you wouldn't dig this. This is just riffs and just brutality done the old-fashioned way. Now, the EP overall is a little bit different. The songs are much longer. I feel like they're way more sinister and brutal. Like the production on it, I think, is much heavier too. I would even say that this sort of like crosses over into like brutal death metal territory, like a little bit more close to like Suffocation. You do have a bit of a loose kind of pingy snare, like it's not like completely off-putting, but it's noticeable. Actually, some of this kind of reminds me of like early Internal Bleeding in terms of like the more brutal aspects. But this also has like a lot more atmosphere to it. Like you have more haunting soundscapes in the background, and it definitely adds to the overall vibe of this. Now, I dug pretty much all this, except for the last track, Mofo Ald Ferenc Yabarov. Not entirely sure what that means. Not entirely sure I said it right because like it's that font and it's already not in English and it's me. Anyway, this is a 9-minute ambient track that really does not go anywhere. Yeah, it's noisy. Like there's like kind of a muffled bass in the background, so at least there's one instrument playing. The rest of this is just ambient noise and whispers and like gurgles that sound like cows and pigs and all sorts of other crazy shit. I could see that like leading in a song or something like that, but 9 minutes of it? 9 minutes. No. It's the most skippable song on this. But outside of that, I dug both of these. This is just some solid old school death metal, riffy. This one has a little bit more brutality to it, but this one has that just amazing 90s old school death metal sound to it. You really can't go wrong with both. Minus the last track in here. I'm gonna labor that point. Like seriously, I dare that song to be more skippable. But outside of that, these are awesome. Super glad that Dark Descent did these reissues. I strongly recommend it if you're a fan, again, of Suffocation, Baphomet, Immolation, Mortiscald, early Jungle Rot, stuff like that. Definitely check both of these out. All right, we got a split here from Nattmaran and Terrorcross. Rise of the Nightmare Terror. This came out last year on Wiseblood Records, which this is actually kind of a gift from Wiseblood Records. We ran into their main dude. I'm sorry, I forgot your damn name, and I probably should have wrote it down. But he was selling stuff over at Heavy Hell, and he said, hey, man, take a couple out of here, and, you know, they're yours. Thank you for your support. I was like, dude, that's really fucking cool of you, man. He even gave us a cool tote bag, too. Like, super solid dude. I ended up buying a share, too, just because he was such a cool dude. Anyway, back to this. So we have two stylistically similar bands, but two bands that are very different. Nattmaran, I'm actually familiar with because I got their first album in a Metalhead box forever ago, and this is black and thrash / speed metal from both Sweden and Indonesia. I believe the bassist is from Sweden, and then the rest of the band is from Indonesia, and yeah, this is very much along the lines of bands like Midnight, Toxic Holocaust, and Hellripper. In fact, I believe the song Savage Urges features James McBain from Hellripper as like a backup vocalist. A lot of this is just D-beat driven, riffy. The vocals are snarled and screamed. You have like classic Motorhead and Judas Priest riffs all over here, but done with like blasts and just like a whole bunch of extra energy. This is some ferocious international piss and vinegar here. Burning Heat and Punished by Death are like absolute bangers on their side. They're thrashy and just fucking angry as hell and just great riffs. And I really like their cover of Bathory's Inconspiracy with Satan. I think they did a solid job on there. I do think there's like a little bit too much reverb on that snare, and at some points the vocals can be just a tad goofy, but overall I dig their side. It's mostly about the energy. It's just pure fun. And to keep the fun rolling, Terrorcross, which is a Finnish black and thrash / speed metal act, you know, a bit of a theme here in terms of like the style. This band is just as rowdy, just as feral. Their whole side is like an evil rager. Everyone is drunk and destroying things and setting shit on fire. Like, that's definitely the vibe I'm getting here. It's fast-paced. The guitars are absolutely insanely heavy. Like, they have so much sizzle and just crunch to them. Like, it's almost bordering on too much, but I managed to power my way through it because the riffs are just sick. My personal favorite song was probably Sexual, but I admittedly really enjoyed the Manowar cover, Gloves of Metal, which I can't help but to think of Smell the Glove by Spinal Tap, just because that movie rules. And I don't know, I'm not the biggest Manowar fan. I do love making fun of them because, man, those photo shoots involved way too much skin and way too much oil. But either way, this split was a ton of fun. Like, this is just rowdier than hell. It's pretty much all breakneck speed. It's just all the fun stuff I love about black and thrash, and it's two different bands doing it. So yeah, if you have not checked out either one of these bands, check out Nattmaran. I know their first album, The Lurking Evil, is a lot of fun, and this was my first experience with Terrorcross, and I think I need to find some Terrorcross because they're really good too. So yeah, like Midnight, Bathory, Hellripper, Toxic Holocaust, stuff like that, definitely check this out. Shroud of Vulture, Upon a Throne of Jackals. This is the debut album from this Indianapolis blackened death doom act. I saw this one in the bin for Wiseblood Records, and he said this was their only one left, I believe, or at least close to the last one left. And when he said it was blackened death doom, I was pretty much instantly sold there. Now, I knew nothing about this band. I knew that it came out in 2020, and that was about it. And outside of the description of their sound, which was still kind of vague, really didn't know what I was getting into, but I absolutely love this. This leans a little bit more on the doom side. Like, you have a lot of slow, droning riffs, lots of dissonant melodies. You get occasional, like, more death metal tremolos on here, but a lot of, like, blackened atmosphere. And right from the rip, the opening track, Final Spasms of the Drowned, good song title, you get a good slow buildup. Like, you get the droning riffs and then the stomping floor toms before you get into the music. And when I first heard that song and then hearing the vocals, I thought it was just like background screams, like just something to add atmosphere. But the vocals are kind of like way back in the mix for the most part. So you kind of have this like very musically dominated sound, but the background sort of dry howls and screams, it kind of adds like a layer of atmosphere. Like, I think they might be like too far back in the mix occasionally, but at the same time, it kind of gives it this very haunting sound overall. Now, while a lot of this is very slow and lumbering, you do get sections where blast beats come in, like the altar, perverted reflection, or stone coffin of existence. So it kind of speeds it up a little bit and kind of gets it out of the doom groove that this album definitely holds on to. There is a bit more blackened vibe on songs like Perverted Reflection. The tremolos are a little bit colder and icier, and Concealing Rabid Laughter. That's a really good song title too. I feel like I do conceal rabid laughter often when I'm reading some of these song titles, especially in the gore grind stuff. But Concealing Rabid Laughter actually has like a good like old school D beat to it. So a lot of just nasty kind of like, I don't know, like early black metal riffs, like, a little bit of Celtic Frost kind of just worked its way in there. And I gotta say, the production here I think is really good. The guitars sound absolutely wonderful. They're low and droney. The chugs really have a lot of heft to them. The drums sound great. Again, vocals kind of maybe a little bit too far back in the mix, but it kind of works with the overall vibe of this album. And I would say the vibe of this album more often than not is more doom metal. Like, you have more death/blackened vocals and moments where it kind of pivots more towards the death metal side or a little bit more blackened, but at its core, doom is the main thing on here. All the riffs definitely kind of stick to that droning doom formula, and it works. This whole thing works. I am super glad that I picked this up. I ended up really enjoying this entire album. This album just is flat out riff and gloom and misery, and I'm into that. So yeah, if you like stuff like, I would definitely say like Hooded Menace, but like more along the lines of like earlier Hooded Menace. There's definitely some moments on here that remind me of Pallbearer, albeit not like vocally, but in terms of some of the riffs on here and the atmosphere. Definitely check this out. This is an absolutely solid album. Abortofacient, I think that's how you say that word. In the Crypt of Gore. This is the debut EP from this Belgian death metal act. This is a 3-piece. I got this in the Metalhead box, and their names are absolutely ridiculous. Like, they went full bore, like, ridiculous death metal names. We have Bone Consumer on bass, Puking Guts on drums, and on guitars we have Rotten Putrid. And one of them's doing vocals, could be all three of them. I don't know. This also includes their Corpus Rotting demo from 2020, and this is just absolutely putrid, disgusting, old school death metal, almost kind of punky, like a little bit of like autopsy worship. Everything is very D-beat driven, pockets of blast. The vocals are low guttural pukes. The guitars and bass sort of meld together into this rotten, sludgy, just grossness altogether. Like, this is just an absolutely putrid sounding album. It's very muddy, it's very swampy, it's very primal. The songs are simple and kind of go for the throat and then rip it out, then eat the throat meat, and then puke it back on the person that they ripped it from, and then think of another way to defile the corpse, and then that is also kind of what this album/EP is all about. It kind of sounds like Incantation doing Mortician covers in a way. Like, it's just gross. The songs are short. They're just kind of violent and punky and very minimalistic. Like, they're not going to get a lot of like, technical flair. Like, actually the riffs are kind of more punky overall when they get down to like, the faster sections. You do get some nasty like riffy grooves on Catherine of Siena and The Rotting Balm, which I don't know what that is. Like, is that like zombie lip balm or something like that? Like, I don't know if that's really going to help. Like, everything's kind of rotting at that point. Why even bother? And honestly, from the EP to the demo, there's not really much of a change. Like, in terms of the overall production, it's still muddy and gross. I think maybe the guitars have like a little bit more crunch on them, but overall they still sound absolutely putrid. And that's, kind of cool. Like, I like, just raw, ugly death metal, but there are some like levels on here in terms of the mix that are kind of odd, especially the drums. The drums just sound really muddy and indistinct, especially the snare. The snare just has this odd tone in general. Like, it's not like a thwack or like a kind of a plunky sound or anything like that. It just sounds Like they hit nothing. And that sucks because I can kind of lose it at points. Like even in like the, punkier kind of grindcore two steps that are on here, the snare becomes kind of indistinct. But overall, like this is just flat out gross. Like this is just putrid and rotten. And if you like your death metal kind of like a rotten, bloated deer corpse on the side of the highway, like this is kind of like that. Like this is just absolutely filthy. I'd say like Autopsy fans and Mortician fans would definitely appreciate this. Probably some Incantation fans too. I don't know. It's just gross as hell, and you should just check it out. Nosus, The Third Eye. This is the debut album from this Miami-based blackened death metal act. Another one that I got in the Metalhead box a while ago, and another one that is like a flat-out first listen for me. I had heard of this band, but I never actually jammed their stuff, so I was pretty curious about this one, and it's all right. It has a kind of a cool atmospheric opening with like rain trickling into a sewer or something like that. You get into a nice heavy opening riff, and then you get some tremolos that honestly, like you can hear like that surf rock sort of tremolo to it. Like it's kind of odd. Like I know I was like thinking like second wave stuff, but I was also thinking Dick Dale quite a bit too. It's got a nice raw sound to it. I do think it is a little bit dry and the vocals are a bit out front, but there's some cool punky elements to it, especially when they get more towards the black metal side. The Plague of Azotus and the eponymous track Gnosis, definitely has some like punk roots. It kind of reminds me a lot of like Horned Almighty. But then when you get down to songs like Temple of the Sea, Chariot of the Sun Moon, and Lotan's Dwelling, the death metal side really comes out, and it's got some good like old school death metal riffs. Definitely some similarities to like Acheron and Angel Corpse. I don't think it's quite as riffy as Angel Corpse, because few things are as riffy as Angel Corpse. But I will say the riff variety is pretty good. Again, punk, death metal, black metal. There's even some classic heavy metal on the Cult of the Great Serpent. There's almost some like old school like Judas Priest or Iron Maiden licks in there. Just kind of play it through a blackened filter. I do think the synths on that song are a little bit too cheesy for the song. Like you kind of lose the sinister edge and it becomes, kind of like a bad 80s horror movie where like, it's supposed to be scary, but I'm kind of laughing and it's just dumb, gory fun. And there are some other issues with the production. I could have sworn I heard the bass kind of clipping in the mix a couple of times. I also think that the drums occasionally are a bit off, at least I kind of heard that. And the last track, the title track, is kind of a dull closer. Like it's an intro and an outro thing. So you have the intro, which, intros are whatever. This one's not terrible, but at the same time, kind of skippable. And then you have an outro, which honestly sounds like loading screen music for like a PlayStation 1 or a PlayStation 2 game, and I really wasn't feeling it. This album's all right. Like, admittedly, I do think it's a little dull in spots. It does have its moments, but I'm willing to check out more by them, but I really wasn't like super impressed with this, but still, you might really dig it. You won't know until you check it out for yourself. Again, kind of similar to Angel Corpse. Again, like not quite as good as Angel Corpse, but I hold that band in high esteem. I'd also say Acheron and Horned Almighty. If any of those bands interest you at all, I would say give this one a whirl. Check it out, form your own opinions. Who knows, you might really love it. For me, it was just okay. All right, we got a pair here from Ape Vermin. This is their debut full-length Sonic Monolith, and this is their follow-up EP, Arctic Noise. This is a stoner doom sludge band from North Carolina. This band actually features the current second guitarist in Narcotic Wasteland right now, Brett Lee, which is where I got these two. I got them from the merch guy, who the merch guy, I believe, is the bassist in this band. And he just gave these to me. Actually, I think he gave one of these to John, but he gave it to me so I could actually go over it. Anyway, this is kind of far removed from anything that Narcotic Wasteland does, because this is just slow and drony and sludgy as hell. The debut, Sonic Monolith, is heavier than hell. Like, the guitar tone is huge, crunchy, sludgier than hell, And while this band likes to drone, there are some killer fucking riffs on here. The title track, which is like well over the 10-minute mark, is just a long, doomy jam with all sorts of different kinds of riffs mixed in there. You even get some big, heavy breakdowns. There's some noisy effects in there for atmosphere, and you even get some like cool blues licks in there. And it's mostly instrumental. You get brief periods of vocals, which the vocals on here are very harsh and screamed, and honestly, it just kind of fits the mood. Like, it just kind of gives it like a, I don't know, Weed Eater, maybe I Hate God sort of vibe, which is definitely felt on the song Witch Jive, which has a really cool sludgy swing to it. There's some D beats, gets heavier and chuggier in that one. Definitely reminiscent of like some early Mastodon too on the opening track, Astral Drones. But honestly, the song that really stood out to me was the song Abominable Hashmen. That one is just a stoner jam. Like, the whole mood kind of shifts. It's not as ominous and dark and like, you know, oppressive. It's kind of just, you know, trippy and chill. Granted, it's still heavier than hell, but the whole vibe is definitely a little bit more, you know, spacious sounding. And overall, like, this is just a flat out banger. Like, I love good sludge metal that kind of gets outside of the tropes a little bit. And hearing some like stoner metal, desert rock sort of trippiness kind of thrown in there definitely opened this album up quite a bit. And I think that kind of carried over to this one, because this one's a lot different. The guitars are more warm on here, and there's less of a crunch to them. It's more of that sort of like sludgy stoner metal tone. Opens up with a giant 16-minute track, and it's notably like more dynamic. Like, you have more leads peppered in, more atmosphere. There are cleaner sections. I mean, it still gets really heavy, but you also have like cleaner vocals being added to it. And this overall just feels more like on the stoner metal side. Now, there's only 3 tracks on here, but I mean, granted, they're stoner doom, so they're pretty long. But the first 2 tracks definitely have like kind of more like a sleep vibe than anything else. The last track, Arctic Noise, the title track, is notably a bit heavier, like the harsh vocals come back. It definitely has more of like a old school sludge metal vibe to it, but I kind of like what they're doing on the first 2 tracks in terms of opening up. Like, there's still like the heavy sludge metal stuff, but you have a lot of this cool, like spacious, trippy, psychedelic atmosphere to sort of play off of. I do think I like the production a little bit more on the full length than this. It feels like they kind of quieted it down, and granted, it's more open, there's more going on, there's more atmosphere. I feel like the guitars kind of lost a little bit of an edge on here. But overall, I ended up really enjoying both of these. Like, they are heavy, slow, and droning, but man, like, there's a lot of killer riffs on here, and I like the fact that both of these are really different from one another. So yeah, if you're looking for something that's just flat out heavier than hell, like a lot of old school sludge with like a hint of stoner and doom in there, I'd recommend the full length. And if you want something a little bit more on the stoner metal side with, you know, still some doom on there, maybe not as much sludge, I'd say check out this one. But honestly, I'm just going to say check out both, because I think they're both really good. If you're big fans of, you know, Monolord, Truck Fighters, I Hate God, early Mastodon, stuff like that, pretty sure you're going to dig both. So check them both out. Cadaverous, Remnants of Violence. This is the debut full-length from this Indianapolis-based death metal act. They actually opened up for Narcotic Wasteland at that show. Super nice dudes, got to bullshit with them a bit. They put on a solid show. When I saw the album cover and the title of it, it was like, dude that's snacking right now, it seems like starting at the crotch. I don't know if that's like the best place to start. I mean, I'm not like a cannibalistic zombie humanoid creature as far as you know, but I'm reasonably sure that's like starting at the wrong end of the ice cream cone. Anyway, this is just some flat out old school death metal, kind of bordering on brutal death metal. Very straightforward, meat potatoes, riff driven. You get good thrashy sections on Delectable Perspective, I Want to Kill, and Sensory Deprivation. It balances out the groovier sections, the breakdowns. You know, it's kind of like an all-encompassing, very 90s death metal sound. Like, a lot of stuff on here reminds me of stuff like Jungle Rot, Benediction, Massacre, stuff like that, with like maybe like a little bit of like Dying Fetus occasionally popping up in some of the breakdowns. And the breakdowns are pretty solid. Unfathomable Depths, Slam the Coffin Shut, the title track, and Rotted Pile of PDF files. I don't want to say the actual word just because YouTube seems like they're watching me once again. You have some more blasty songs with Burnt Remains, Rot in the Crypt. It's all, again, like very straightforward, very transparent, old school death metal. Like this formula's been sound since the 90s. And for the most part, I think it's pretty good. It does get a little bit samey. It kind of does stay in its lane, but it's a pretty solid lane. My one big complaint on here would probably be the vocals, as they are just kind of flat for the style. Like it's kind of a uniform sort of delivery. There's not a lot of like power behind it, or at least it doesn't sound like there is. There's definitely moments in here where a lower growl or a higher scream every now and then would sort of break up the monotony of the delivery. But I mean, outside of that, I dug this. It's straight up old school death metal. Again, fiercely 90s. Very much along the lines of like, you know, Mortal Skull, Jungle Rot, Benediction Massacre. Like it's straight and to the point. And yeah, I mean, for the most part, I dig that sort of thing. That's kind of the thing I grew up on. So yeah, if you like any of those bands and you're looking for some cool underground death metal from Indiana, check this out. Narcotic Wasteland, self-titled. This is the debut album from this South Carolina-based technical death metal, death thrash, just flat-out death metal act from South Carolina. Features Dallas Toller Wade, formerly of Nile. And this is one I've been trying to hunt down for a while, and again, like another one where discog prices are just a little bit too much for me. Luckily, when they played down in BG, they had copies of this. I immediately pounced on it because, again, I haven't seen these things floating around very often, and I already have Delirium Tremens, their second album, which is fucking fantastic. And this album is more of the same. Like, it's just absolutely awesome, high-speed, intense death metal. Like, holy shit, this album moves at 1,000,000 miles an hour when it's not peppering in samples of people cracking beers and such. Dallas is such an underrated guitarist. Like, he just has this great ability to craft very technical, intricate riffs, but at the same time make them catchy and engaging. And as a vocalist, I think he does a great job too, because he has a more unique vocal approach. Like, it's not your typical death metal roar. He enunciates everything he says, and he has these really cool cadences, but it's kind of that, you know, vocal approach where it almost fits halfway in between like thrash and death metal. And actually, having talked to him a couple of times now, he actually considers this band a little bit more on the thrash side, which you can definitely hear on all the riffs on here. And he's just a super solid dude and just fantastic to watch play. And a lot of these songs they still play live. Anthem for the Mentally Scarred. Keeping Up with the Joneses, I would say, has got to be like a live staple of theirs by now. And Widespread Narcotic Wasteland is an absolutely nasty song, a little bit more groovy in sections, and man, like, it just gets you headbanging. And while most of this album is just high speed as hell, in fact, good luck keeping up with the drum work. It is absolutely insane on here. Awaken, The Herd Beast, and Absent Friends do slow it down a little bit. It gets a little bit more groovy, and it's kind of cool to hear the slower riffs in there because, again, he's just got like a knack for crafting very catchy, solid riffs. And there's some interesting movie samples that kind of caught me off guard, namely on Alcoholic Religious Fanatics. There was a quote from Jeff Goldblum from a movie that I don't think I ever saw, and I went back and watched just because I kind of knew what movie it was from. It was from the movie Mr. Frost. And I remember seeing that in, like, you know, video rental places, and I remember hearing about it. It came out in like 1990. And because I heard that quote, not long after I jammed this, like, you know what, I'm going to see if I can find that movie. And I found it on YouTube. A pirated, like, VHS fucking burn that's on YouTube. And, well, this is a movie I don't think YouTube even gives a shit about in terms of, like, copyright and such, because it kind of sucks. Jeff Goldblum plays Satan, and it sucks. That just seems wrong. And he actually does a good job in it. It's just the movie is just directionless, and the score to the movie is really weird because it's all these like pleasant synths, like we're trying to do like a lighthearted Tangerine Dream thing, but it's a movie about the devil in a fucking psychiatric ward after they find 24 fucking tortured, mutilated bodies on his property. Tonally, it's just ridiculous. But again, like, Jeff Goldblum does a really good job in it. But yeah, this album made me go watch a Jeff Goldblum movie. And unfortunately, it was a shitty one. I'm not going to hold it against the band for that. But this album is absolutely awesome. Strongly recommend this and Delirium Tremens, the follow-up. I think the production's a little bit better on that one. It is a little too compressed on here. Like, the bass kind of just gets kind of cut out, I think, too much on here, and that's even on the bass drums. But man, musically, Jesus, this is just blazing fast, insane. Like if you're a big fan of, I mean, Nile, go ahead and say that. But also like Vader, Deicide, Monstrosity, like fast, thrashy death metal that is just non-stop, in your face, just a barrage of riffs. That is definitely this, so check it out. Knife, Heaven into Dust. This is the second album from this German blackened thrash / speed metal / punk act. I picked up their first one a while ago. I absolutely loved it. Their self-titled debut just whoops ass from front to back, and I don't know, man. This one might be better. I'm not sure, because they're both really good. They both pretty much lay on the thing that they do well, which is fast than hell, galloped riffs, lots of classic heavy metal and thrash mixed in with like a blackened atmosphere. It's over the top and kind of silly, but in such a cool way, like kind of like bands like Butcher and Vulture and maybe like Hellripper too. There are constant machine gun riffs and D beats, lots of melodic flair, great lead play. The vocals are absolutely maniacal as hell, like almost like comic book villain-esque. It's a full throttle ride, and it has like such a good like kind of nostalgic production value. It has like a more like old school sound to it. Like it sounds like it could have come out in the 80s, albeit like it does have a little bit more polish to it. There's lots of cool punky sections on it. The title track, A Phantom Demise, which has some absolutely amazing dissonant melodies on it. There's awesome thrashy breakdowns on Hawks of Hades and Realms of Violence. Like this whole album just keeps going, and I like how there's like cool atmospheric sections to sort of add like a little bit more like dimension to this, I guess, because a lot of it is just kind of on the nose, like, you know, very 80s worshiping, but there's some clever melodies on there that aren't necessarily 80s, or at least they kind of took that 80s sound and kind of added like a little bit of like more sinister blackened vibes to it, because none of this I would call like, you know, flat out scary or anything like that. It doesn't have that vibe. This is more like evil party music. You definitely get that vibe in like the more classic 80s heavy metal nods on With Torches They March and the Arson Alchemist as well. Like they're just a little bit more like kind of epic and triumphant, and, you know, just it kind of has that classic 80s sort of vibe to it. The leads on Torches I think are some of the best. In fact, the lead work on here I think is great across the board, but that one really stood out because it really captured that epic vibe. And a lot of these songs are just tight. Like they have a tight runtime across the board. There's really no momentum wasted on here. There's not a lot of like huge intros and, you know, anything like that, just sort of like build up everything. Like a lot of these songs kind of just go, but when they start, like they kind of are good about like isolating a riff and leading it in properly, like a cool turnover or something like that. This band just kind of does everything right for their sound on here, which is kind of the same thing I could say about their first album. So I don't know, between the two, it's hard to pick because I know I like them both. This is an absolute blast to listen. Again, very similar to Vulture, Butcher, Hellripper. If you like any of those bands, even if you like one or two of those bands, I recommend checking this out. This is just a riffy blast of an album, and yeah, you're probably gonna get a speeding ticket listening to this in your car. I've gotten close. Luckily, I saw the cop ahead of time. But yeah, definitely check this out. Nixel, from The Wound Spilled Forth Fire. This is the second album from this Baltimore-based black metal, maybe blackened death metal act. I heard a single, it was on Prosthetics channel on YouTube, and I ended up liking it. I thought it was cool. It was dark and atmospheric and just kind of just evil sounding, and I like that sort of thing, so I decided to check this out, and this is my first experience with this band, and this is pretty solid. Very dissonant, very dark and twisted, lots of like layered vocals. I do also like the fact that they have a song called Enthrall. That's, you know, just a special word to us here. The guitars in here are very thick too. I really like that, instead of like kind of thinning them out in favor of like a more atmospheric sound. Like they have some good heft to them, and when they get down to the chuggier sections on here, it kind of adds some like nice weight to it. But a lot of this is just very atonal, lots of twisted, dark atmosphere, moans and groans and such in the background. And there's a lot of vocal layering on here too, which I do like, because I do think they have multiple vocalists on here. And they're good about like repeating stuff to add like almost a trance effect, like the song Enthrall. Well, it has like a lot of just nasty, chuggy sections, blasts, and atmospheric tremolos. The end of that song, though, has this repeated refrain that gets particularly haunting, like it's kind of chanty and it gets stuck in your head. And it's, I don't know, it's almost like you're kind of like getting initiated into a cult or something like that. Like it has that sort of vibe. Like I don't think this band is a cult, but I mean, they certainly dress like it. There's really solid melodies on The Door Never Closed and Abyss Unto Abyss. And I like the inclusion of some more like death metal riffs on the title track and The Way is the Grave. But honestly, it's the atmosphere in here that really just kind of opens us up and makes it sound creepier than hell. Like the atmospheric tremolos on here are really well done. Very similar to Garia, albeit like possibly more creepy. Like Garia kind of has like more of a melancholy vibe. This really has like more of a sinister dark edge. The Way is the Grave has a great build up with like tribal percussion, but it sounds more like Native American. It starts more slow and brooding, and it's a long build to like a really heavy crescendo, and then it closes with the clattering of coins, which I assume is coins for the ferryman. But yeah, like all of that is very immersive, and I really dug that. So yeah, I really like this band. I definitely want to check out their first album, see if it's as good as this. But for a first experience, yeah, this is dark and haunting, but at the same time still like riffy and fun. Like, you know, they have like that sort of creepy vibe of like bands like Portal, but they're riffy. And honestly, I would say some of this kind of is comparable to like Watain. So if you're a big Watain fan, I would say this is definitely one to check out. Yeah, I definitely want to hear more now. Art of Shock, Shine Black Light. This is the third album from this LA-based thrash metal act. They were first day performers at Full Terror Assault. We actually ran into the dudes. Super nice guys. Had a great conversation about, you know, the music industry, the evolution of music. Honestly, like all the conversations I had with bands and fans alike there, it was just awesome. Now, I believe this band was formed by a pair of brothers, Art and Adrian Gazar. I believe I met... God, I can't remember which one. I don't know if they're twins, but they look very much alike. I think it was the one that was the drummer. Regardless, they put on a solid show and decided to pick up their album after talking to them. And this is very like high octane thrash, though I think there's a lot of other elements on here. Occasionally you get like some more death metal moments. There's some more stuff that I would say is like kind of like classic heavy metal. There's even some stuff that almost kind of borders on stuff like Trivium a bit. It's kind of all over the place. Like you have some more straight ahead like thrashy barn burners like The Spark, which I think is probably my favorite one on here. It's just a full tilt aggressive song, very riff driven. The drums are aggressive as hell in that song, but I think honestly they're kind of aggressive all over the place. You have some more death metal centric riffs on Be None the Wiser and You Don't Know Me, especially the breakdown at the end of that song. And they even threw in like a good catchy chorus every now and then, like Devoid and Death Stays Silent. I do have a bit of an issue though with direction on here because I feel like this band is like pulling in different directions at once. Like there's definitely a thrash anchor to the entire album, but you have sections that immediately flip to death metal. You have some stuff that is definitely more accessible, kind of in that metalcore meets thrash realm of, again, like Trivium. There's also some balladry, which I don't think is very well fitting on here. Like it kind of takes away from the like kind of just razor sharp fast edge of the rest of the album. Like Drag Me to Hell. Drag Me to Hell is ambitious, but I don't think it gels completely. Like it kind of opens up like a Queen song. Like they're kind of doing almost like a Bohemian Rhapsody sort of thing, isolated vocals, and it just has that sort of like build up like, you know, a lavish Queen song. And there's other stuff that's kind of like that on here where I feel like, again, they're just kind of, you know, going too many different directions. I feel like this album is too busy with a lot of different ideas rather than just having like a solid thrash sound, which is more than apparent on all the tracks that thrash is still their main gear. Now, this is the only album I've heard by them. I haven't heard their two previous albums, so I'm kind of just going by this one, but while I like a good chunk of this, there's definitely stuff on here I just feel is a little bit too much, and like they're trying to, you know, test the waters and find some new elements to bring into their sound overall. And, well, I mean, they found some stuff, it just doesn't all fit. When it's heavy and focused, it's pretty damn solid, but when it starts kind of venturing into different territory, the songwriting kind of goes off the rails a bit, and it kind of just loses me. But overall, I thought this was pretty decent. I thought their live performance was really good, and they're really solid dudes, like great to talk to. I do want to hear some of their earlier stuff, but this one kind of feels like they were trying too hard to branch out in different directions, and it just didn't gel very well. But I still recommend checking it out, form your own opinions. Who knows, you might really dig this. Again, I don't think it's necessarily bad. I just think it's a little uneven, but definitely packed with riffs and high energy. So yeah, check it out. Assassinator, Dead Man Double Tap. This is the second album from this one-man death thrash industrial act. I actually ran into this dude at FTA. He just gave this to me, Johnny North, and I believe I had actually talked to him before in YouTube comments and such. I just couldn't remember what his handle was on YouTube. But we ended up running into each other multiple times. And he handed me this the first day. And I told him it was going to be a while before I got to it because I had a lot of stuff. And, well, here we are, so many collection updates later. Now, I believe he told me it was kind of like just thrash metal, maybe a little bit of death metal. Honestly, man, this is like kind of a culmination of a ton of things that I listened to in the 90s. Like, there are big thrash metal sections. It's definitely a drum machine in there, and you have samples. So there's a lot of stuff on here that kind of reminded me of like Fear Factory. But you also had like heavy machine gun riffing, like again, like very like Slayer, Sepultura. And there's also a lot of groove to it and breakdowns, which reminded me of like Machine Head and shit like that. So a lot of this was very reminiscent of stuff that I listened to when I was really just starting to get into metal in general. There's tons of big syncopated grooves. There's a lot of like 90s hardcore involved in there. The vocals reminded me a lot of Godflesh, like because they're like kind of a big hearty bellow, and that was very telling because they actually cover Godflesh's Spite on here, which they fucking do a great job. And I say they because it's a band name. It's one dude. And I always fuck that up when it comes down to like one-man bands. I was honestly surprised at like some of the more blast beat driven sections too, because I really wasn't sure I was going to get that. Again, the way you described it was more thrash metal. And some of that stuff is kind of similar to like early Strapping Young Lad as well, which is yet another band I love. And you even get like a fair amount of like 90s groove metal in there too. And well, there's another cover in there of Damageplan's Newfound Power. I'm not the biggest fan of that album, and it's kind of a sore memory for, well, any Pantera fan, I would say. But he did a good job. I'm just not a fan of that song or that band or that album or that memory, honestly. But credit where credit's due. Overall, I really enjoyed this. Like, the production's definitely a little rough, but it's kind of like 90s rough, and it's kind of like an all-over, like, 90s metal sound. Like, I was thinking about, again, like bands like Fear Factory, Machine Head, Prong. There's definitely some stuff in here that reminds me of Prong, Strapping Young Lad, Godflesh. Like, these are all bands that I definitely cut my teeth on, and I think he did a pretty solid job kind of piecing this all together. So yeah, if you're a 90s metal buff like I am, I would definitely check this out. I'm not entirely sure if he's got a Bandcamp or anything. I'm going to link whatever I can find in terms of like a YouTube video or something for this. But regardless, try to hunt this down. This was a lot of fun to listen to, especially for a dude that got into metal in the 90s. Like, this definitely reminded me a lot of stuff that I already loved. So yeah, check it out. Coffin Dust, Nightmare Vision. This is the third album from this Philly-based death thrash, death grind act. I own their first two albums, gone over them in collection updates. This band actually features Matt Ferry, who, as a one-time member of Exhumed, he played live with them for a while. And he also plays live in Contusion, which is another band that I went over very recently. First off, I'm going to say again, there are entirely too many Coffin bands to keep up with, like Coffin Rock, Coffins, Coffin Mulch. I'm just hitting the tip of the Coffin iceberg there. But yeah, there's too many. But I so far like most of them. So, I mean, generally if Coffin's in the title, there's at least a good chance I'm probably going to check it out. Anyway, I like their first two albums. I think their second album was an improvement over the debut. But this one is easily their best yet. These songs are way more dynamic, longer, tons of fucking riffs, lots of cool like horror synth atmosphere. It's gory, it's grimy, and I mean, it sounds a lot like Exhumed. Like Exhumed and Impaled, Engorged, like those kinds of bands where you get like tons of thrash gallops, lots of like classic thrashy riffs, but like sort of a grindy death metal energy behind all of it. You get the same kind of like vocal flips you get with Carcass. You get like the high screams, the low growls, the absolutely catchier than hell riffs, which are mostly kind of more thrashy. But I mean, you get some like punky rippers like Boneyard Rampage. That song absolutely whoops ass, especially when you get down to the Slayer-esque breakdown on that song. But I mean, the breakdown that really got me was Kaiju Taken. I think that's how you say that word. It's got kaiju in it. So, I mean, as a Godzilla fan, I already appreciate that. But the breakdown on that song is savage and catchy as hell. And they peppered in some fun samples that I absolutely recognize right away. Like Six Shift has the whole, oh, he wants to go off-road sample from Ace Ventura 2. And Ectoplasmic Meltdown has a sample from Ghostbusters 2. Absolutely appropriate. And that just adds to the fun, riffy nature of this album in general. But honestly, it's the longer songs that I really latched onto because, man, they just go all out in terms of like cool transitions, riffs, melodies. Like, they're just solid songs. REM/Nightmare, the opening track, is a great like horror synth setup. And man, does it build into just insane riffing left and right. Grave Euphoria is an absolute banger, and the big closer, Vision, is a beast of a song, and they even do like a big finish sort of outro to it. This whole album whoops ass, and I'm so glad I found it. This was at the CDN Records booth at FTA, and that was actually where we ran into Cannibal Cam there too, which that was such an awesome run-in. He was just a super cool dude, and he absolutely sold me on this one, and well, the next one that I'm going to bring up too. But yeah, if you love Exhumed, Impaled, Carcass, any of that shit, and you like it nice and thrashy, definitely check this album out. It is a banger from start to finish, and I would say so far the best thing from this band. So yeah, check it out. Last Wretch, Sadism and Severed Heads. This is the debut album from this Canadian death metal act. Came out last year, also on CDN Records. I also got it at the same booth. I already alluded to that. This was also recommended to me by Cam, and it was also recommended in the comments like fucking forever ago. I just didn't get around to getting it. See, I listen. I just don't always get around to getting everything. And I feel like I should have got this like last year when it came out, because this is an absolute banger. This is short, to the point, riffy, groovier than hell. Like, there's a lot of like 200 stab wounds, like Frozen Soul sort of energy. Like, every riff on here just means business. They are chunky, they are heavy. There's a little bit of brutal death metal in the vocals, and you know, some good slammy breakdowns. The production on it is nasty. Everything sounds crunchy and mean, and it is fiercely old school. The opening track, Neurosis, you get some like squealies in the fucking breakdown that sound very much like Pantera. Like, that was instantly what I thought of when I heard that, and it definitely has that sort of vibe. And with as much groove that's on here, I think Pantera's got to be like a little bit in their wheelhouse. Like Doom Rider, Cannibals of Tuma. These songs lay on the groove, but there's great breakdowns mixed in. There's awesome blast beats. There's a fierce Cannibal Corpse energy to the song Dead as Fuck, which I feel like is like a spiritual sequel to Sanguisugabog's Dead as Shit. Not really sure which one's a worse state to be in, but either way, you're dead. Wallowing in Feculence, that sounds gross. It's got some cool bluesy leads on it, and Obtain in a Dismal Cesspool just reeks of Morbid Angel. This whole thing is only about 27 minutes long, and all 27 minutes of it is just vicious as hell. This really doesn't wane at any point. There's nothing on here where I felt like it was filler. Everything was pretty much whittled down to its most lethal parts, and just honed to brutal perfection. And just honed till it was like the most brutal, riffy, but catchy thing. Like, these guys know how to write catchy riffs across the board, but this does not skimp on brutality whatsoever. Flat out, this album just wants you to headbang and destroy some shit, and I totally get it. Yeah, this absolutely rips. I love every track on it. It is just a ruthless listen. It may only be 27 minutes long, but it is 27 minutes of just fury and riffs. If If you're a big fan, again, of like 200 Stab Wounds, Sanguisugabog, Creeping Death, Tribal Gaze, stuff like that, where it's groovy and chuggy and heavier in hell, but also like a lot of like 90s death metal too, definitely check this out. All right, got a pair here from M.O.D, Method of Destruction. I've been meaning to get some M.O.D for a while. And, well, at Full Terror Assault, like any good festival, there was a guy selling a lot of cool CDs. So we have their 87 debut album, USA for M.O.D, and their follow-up album, Gross Misconduct. And for those who don't know, this band, I guess you could say, is like the spiritual successor to S.O.D. This was Billy Milano pretty much carrying on with what S.O.D did on Speak English or Die, even though, you know, the rest of the band kind of went off to their respective projects. He wanted to keep that crossover thrash going, and he did. So much so that he kind of took the title to what would have been the follow-up to S.O.D, Speak English or Die, and turned it into USA for M.O.D instead of USA for S.O.D. And while I like this one, like there's definitely some awesome thrashy bangers on here, like Imported Society, Get a Real Job, Man of Your Dreams, that is an absolutely killer track on here. A lot of this kind of feels like a second-rate S.O.D, unfortunately. Like, I think it's good, but at the same time, I think Billy was trying so hard to recapture the S.O.D vibe that this didn't really have an identity of its own. Then I gotta bring up some of the humor on here. Granted, you know, Billy is kind of noted for being a bit of a dick. That's just kind of what he does. He likes his humor very cynical and in your face, but some of the stuff on here feels very dated, especially the opening track, Aren't You Hungry? I think even back then he got some shit for some of the stuff he said. Granted, it was all like dark humor. I don't know. I don't know if people necessarily believed him. A lot of Billy stuff is, you know, very cynical in nature, and generally I can handle that as long as it's got the tunes to back it up, but a lot of the tunes in here, you know, they really didn't have like the same punch as S.O.D. And it's kind of hard not to compare the two because you even have Scott Ian doing some production here with Alex Perialis. You know, it has kind of the same vibe. The songs are short, they're bombastic, there are skit tracks, but a lot of the humor kind of falls flat because I think he's just trying to like piss off people rather than deliver some funny jokes. That and, well, I mean, you don't have like the riff work that you have on S.O.D on this one. Like, I feel like that also kind of falls flat a bit too. I even feel like there's some recycled riffs on Hate Tank and Spandex Enormity, which, yeah, he's got a thing about like dogging on fat chicks in here too, among other people, like all people, like everyone, all the time. They even revisit the What's That Noise skit that was on Speak English or Die, and I mean, admittedly, that was kind of funny. It's still decent, I still like it. I just feel like I have a less clever version of Speak English or Die with this one. Now, Gross Misconduct, I think, is a huge step up. Musicianship, the riff writing, the songs are a little bit longer, and I think they're just put together a lot better. In fact, like, I think most of these songs are just flat out rippers. Everything about this one is just tighter. It kind of sounds like they're coming in their own, like this is their sound rather than trying to just do the S.O.D thing again. Dude, like No Glove, No Love, that's an absolute ripper of a song. Come As You Are, kind of like it a little bit better than the Nirvana one. I'm just kind of tired of that one anyway. And when this band comes as they are, they come with baseball bats and beer. Satan's Cronies is an absolute beast. And here the humor feels maybe like a little bit more fresh, like he wasn't trying to force the edginess on here, he was just trying to be clever. Like the jazzy breakdown on Accident Scene, where he like goes over every member of the band, does like a little spoken word bit over like this, again, jazzy little interlude. I thought that was hilarious. I thought it was actually kind of clever too, and that was something that I felt was kind of missing on this one. This is also like a touch groovier. I would say this is more of a thrash metal album. It doesn't have as much punk to it. I mean, the title track definitely has like a more punk chorus, but everything around it is 100% more thrash metal. You also have their Fear cover, In the City, which they did on the live Abortofacient for S.O.D, and it's kind of cool hearing a studio version of it. Though I have to say I like the live version better just because, I don't know, it's just an awesome live album. And it's hard for me not to like Dark Knight. I'm a giant comic book nerd, and they did Jim Gordon on here. It was a decent song. Dark Knight whoops ass. It's Batman, it's thrash metal. Two things I absolutely love, and they absolutely crushed it on this one. I do think the front half is a little bit more serious, or like serious for them, but it gets a little bit looser and goofier as it goes on, especially towards the back half. But honestly, the music on here was just solid as hell. Now, I actually looked at like the archives in terms of like stuff that came out after this. I know there's an EP between these two that I'm probably going to check out too. But yeah, looking at the reviews on almost anything after this, doesn't sound like I necessarily want to get those, because man, there's a lot of trashing those albums. And it seems like every release Billy Milano had an entirely new lineup, so I think there's definitely some serious turnover issues. And I mean, I could see Billy being kind of tough to work with. But as it stands, these are both good. This is definitely the better of the two. This one, it's all right. Like, it's pretty good. But again, like, I feel like I could just listen to Speak English or Die instead of this one and get a better overall effect. And yeah, this one I can just listen to because it's just solid thrash metal and it's not really trying too hard to be Speak English or Die. Either way, definitely check out both. I mean, M.O.D. are pretty legendary in their own right. Maybe not as legendary as S.O.D., but I mean, they're still pretty good. So yeah, check them out. Morbicon of Mournful Twilight. This is the debut album from this Richmond, Virginia black metal act. Features Landfill and Dave Witt of Municipal Waste, as well as Adam Gillians from Cannabis Corpse. And yeah, all those guys worked together in a multitude of different side projects. And I suppose it was only a matter of time before they got together into the black metal one. And here it is. And honestly, this is just flat out awesome. This band played live at FTA, and I was just blown away by their performance. Now, I had never listened to this before seeing them live, and that may have like kind of like affected my expectations, because I mean, all of the side projects and, you know, Municipal Waste itself, when it comes down to the bands, there's always a lot of levity in them. And this is just straight up awesome, riffy black metal. Like, this isn't like humorous or goofy or anything. This is just straightforward, badass black metal with tons of riffs and melodies. Great songwriting across the board. I mean, great drum work, of course, because Dave Witt's a beast. But man, this is just sick. You got solid production. It still sounds cold and icy, but well mixed and well produced. The vocals are exceptional. I don't know who the vocalist is. It just goes by one name on archives. I probably should have looked him up, but it didn't look like he was in any other bands. And stylistically, like, it's a good mix of different kinds of black metal. Like, you have very old school, like more first wave stuff, like Bathory Worship on Universal Funeral. Some good two-steps in there. It's riffy. It's kind of punky. But on the next track, Cursed to March on Shattered Limbs, that's a good title. That one gets a lot more epic. Like, you get a lot more of the, like, Emperor and Immortal vibes to it. Like, big, triumphant riffs, but they're cold and sinister. There's great melodic lead work throughout there, and there's a good, like, peaks and valleys in the song, so there's a lot more dynamics. That's also on the title track, too, which absolutely whoops ass. And you even get some more, like, aggro, kind of thrashy stuff on, like, Death Thirst in Ritual Isolation, the opening track, Consumed by Entropy. It's more about the aggression than it is like the sinister atmosphere or anything like that. Honestly, this entire album I really dug, and at no point did I think this band was from Richmond listening to it. Like, I kind of removed that from my brain, because this sounds very Scandinavian. Like, I mean, it definitely has its Norway tropes. There's also elements of like Swedish black metal in there. There's a lot of dissection worship in terms of the songwriting, in terms of like the dynamics, and especially in the lead work and melodies on here. And the atmosphere, I think, is really cool in here, because it kind of varies up to, like, in Ritual Isolation opens up almost like a Godflesh song, like it's kind of an industrial drum and bass sort of start, and then it breaks into the song itself. And the song Born of Phantom Vessel gets almost symphonic, but it doesn't come across as cheesy. Like, it keeps that sinister energy throughout. And I absolutely love the savage breakdown at the end of Infinite Pathways to the Earth and Grave. This entire album whooped ass and kind of surprised me a little bit, because, again, I kind of expect like a level of absurdity and humor and levity in terms of any project these guys are involved in, but no, this is just straight up awesome, riffy black metal, and I dug the entire thing. So yeah, if you have never checked this one out, I strongly recommend it. If you're a big fan of, again, like Immortal, Dissection, Emperor, but also like some just like Dark Throne, and, you know, a little bit of Bathory in there too, like just a lot of good shit. Just check it out. Awesome. Mortification, Primitive Rhythm Machine. I know that sounds like a tribute album for Lars Ulrich, but no, actually it's not. Anyway, this is the 5th album from this Australian death thrash act. Came out in 1995. For those that don't know, this is a Christian death metal death thrash act. I actually like a lot of their earlier work, and then some of their later work starts slipping, and this is kind of hitting that slope point of their career, at least in my opinion. A good chunk of this album almost runs like a Christian metal tribute to Sepultura's Chaos AD. So it's, you know, Christian AD, Jesus loves me. You can do the rest of the lyrics yourself. That's all I wrote down on my notes. But their lyrics have always been very preachy-ish, like not really that clever. That's not really the big, draw in for me with this band. It's usually the riff work. The riff work is generally awesome, and for the most part, I think it's really solid in here. But the very transparent Sepultura worship on here, right down to the tribal percussion and, more groove metal-centric sound that Chaos AD had, is like super apparent on here. There's solid riff work on here. I will always give them that. These guys do know how to write riffs. Mephibosheth, or Mephibosheth, however you say that word. It's not printed very clearly back here. Got some great riffs on it. Seen It All, same thing. Lots of good groovy sections on there. And, when groove metal is done well, I still do really like it. The song 4031 or 4031 or whatever, I don't know if it's like a biblical passage reference, whatever. Thrashy Barn Burner. Absolutely sick song. Good amount of energy to it. The production in here is, I don't know, it's kind of odd. Like, it feels very dry and empty, but at the same time, it's not bad at all. Like, everything still sounds crisp. It just sounds very, isolated from one another. Like, everything feels maybe too separated. The vocals are interesting because you get kind of a dual vocal thing. Like, there is definitely one main frontman that does most of the vocals, and then you have one that comes in and does either higher screams or lower growls. I can't remember which. And there's even clean vocals on Providence, which, while I think they're pretty good, there's some good kind of wailing on there, almost kind of Warl Danish, they don't necessarily kind of fit. And, well, another issue with this is, there's a lot of filler on here, and some of this is just kind of very basic groove metal. Like the song The True Essence of Power. That song it kind of comes in Kickstart My Heart by Motley Crue, except it's Kickstart My Prayer Circle. It's just very generic. The song really doesn't go anywhere. It kind of feels like maybe this was an attempt at a single at some points, because it does feel tamed down a little bit compared to some of the other material in here, but it's just kind of there. Now, again, I do like their earlier stuff. Their self-titled album, I think, is really good. It's definitely blending death and thrash metal, and well, the lyrics are less annoying when I can't make out every word they say, because, even by, Christian metal standards, some of these lyrics are just really dumb. And, the last track, Killing Evil, just repeats Killing Evil over and over again for the entire 45 seconds of that kind of crossover-ish number. Yeah, the creativity, I don't think, has ever been in the lyrics. It's generally been in their riff writing, and I do like some of this stuff on here, but overall, there's a lot of filler in here that just does not really jump out as much as the earlier stuff. Still, I do want to check out more of the earlier albums that I am missing, but this one, it's just kind of a mixed bag for me. But again, check it out, form your own opinions. Honestly, if you like Chaos AD, but you wish it didn't sound as good, maybe this is the thing you want to listen to? Maybe? I don't know. I don't know how else to build this one. It's kind of groove metal, kind of thrash metal, kind of death metal. I don't know. Check it out, form your own opinions. It does have its moments. That's about all I can say. It's just sort of an odd album. Bare minimum, it's at least more interesting than going to church. Necessary Death. This is their self-titled debut EP, all 6 minutes of it. This is a crust/grind/brutal death metal act from South Bend, Indiana. They were a first day band at FTA, and honestly one of my favorites of the day. This is just pure D-beat oriented grimy, crusty violence, and I loved every second of it. And again, it's only like 6 minutes. We actually met these guys at their booth. Super nice dudes. We actually talked about like the metal and the hardcore scene, and again, you know, I had a ton of great conversations with like people all over that fest. But they actually just gave us this, to which I just gave them at least $5 for gas because, you know, get them down the road a little bit at least. But all 5 songs on here are a savage, brutal mix of hardcore punk, crust, death metal. The guitar tone is almost that HM2 sort of just grimy sizzle and chunk to it. I love the production overall. It sounds great. The drums have a good punch to it. The vocals are super nasty. And this band will be at MDF next year. And believe me, if I have time, I'm definitely going to catch them once again. There's a lot of the punk and hardcore aesthetic in here. The songs are very socially pointed towards definitely the shit they don't like. But musically, and one of the things that they really loved was the fact that I compared them to Disrupt, which they're all big Disrupt fans. And it's totally accurate. Like, this has a bit of that vibe of Unrest, albeit I would say like a little bit more on the brutal side, but in terms of the crust aspects and those grind aspects, these guys definitely have like a Disrupt aura to them. I would even say like a more crust-oriented Rotten sound is very comparable to. This whole EP just rips. It's only 6 minutes, so I don't know how much more I can actually elaborate on that. I would say just jam it, and if you don't like it, at least it won't take that long to get through the entire thing. And if you do like it, you can play this so many damn times over and over again, and it'll probably be just as awesome the first time you heard it. So yeah, definitely check this band out. Again, Maryland Death Fest next year. I'm going to try to catch them if I can. Again, like everyone's playing once again next year, so we'll see. But yeah, this whole EP absolutely rips, and I'm looking forward to new material from these guys. Serox, The Next. This is the debut album from this then Mexican technical brutal death metal act. They have members from all over the world, but I believe like the core members that started were originally from Mexico, so I guess we'll just count it as Mexico. Now, I actually own one of their full lengths, the Phobos/Deimos Suite, and John and I actually covered their last EP, Vor, when that one dropped, and we liked what we heard, and then lo and behold, going over this, I found out that this band broke up this year. Now, at least on this one, they have current and former members of bands like Lecherous Nocturne, Monstrosity, and Aeon. And this is just flat out vicious. In fact, the opening track, the title track, pretty much comes in like a jump scare. Like, there's no build up. It is into blasts and twisting riffs and guttural vocals. Kind of just sounds like Cryptopsy, like right out of the gate. And that comes down to the drumming too. The drumming definitely sounds very inspired by Flow, especially on tracks like Urban Terror and The Silent One. You have those weird off-time drum patterns and these cool scattered fills everywhere. And that's kind of coupled with all the twisting angular riffs that are just all over this thing. While a lot of this is just savage and brutal and very technical, there are some good melodies in it. The Shining One, again, has, you know, again, all the brutality and technicality that is on the rest of the album, but there are some cool melodies, especially toward the end of the song. It's actually pretty damn catchy. And the last track, Alienus Gignesthai, I have no idea how to say that word. In fact, I've never seen that word before in my life. But the last track is notably a little bit more groovy, kind of slows down, gives it a little bit of that Morbid Angel sort of sludginess. And it's a little bit more controlled because while I like that very, you know, Cryptopsy style, there's a lot of off-time drumming and weird guitar patterns and such, and it can get a little jagged at times. In fact, a lot of the transitions on here are a bit on the knee-jerk side overall. And a lot of this, I would say, is more on the technical side of death metal versus the brutal side. Like, there's definitely its brutal moments, but a lot of this is about just the twisting weird riffs and just trying to be like more technical in terms of the writing. And unfortunately for me, that kind of leads to a lot of the songs being very samey. Like, they kind of have a lot of the same, you know, tropes to them. There are some that really do stand out in terms of like some dynamics, some like really good lead play, or just like a nice melodic section, but a lot of this kind of ran together. I like what they did on the one that I own, the Deimos Suite, Phobos, whatever the hell it is. It technically has like 2 titles. I don't get that. But anyway, I like that one more because I think the songs are kind of separated up a little bit as far as like technical parts, melodic, catchy parts. It's just a little bit more smoothed out as far as the songwriting goes. But overall, I still think this is pretty damn good. Like, it's consistent throughout. There are some good moments to break it up, but I don't think there's quite enough because, like, towards the middle of the album, a lot of the stuff started running together. But if you're a big fan of Cryptopsy, I would say, like, is the main comparison there, then definitely check this one out. Pretty solid release. Check out their later stuff too, and their last EP they put out was pretty solid as well. So yeah, check it out. All right, we got a pair here from Pit Lord. This is some barbecue-themed two-man death metal from Iowa. This is their second album, Seasonings in the Abyss, and this is their third album, Gallery of Skewered Swine, and both of these are awesome. This is just straightforward, riffy, two-man death metal, kind of in the same vein as bands like Fulci and maybe Mortician, albeit like less blasty. In fact, a lot of this is just groove and riff and heavy, and everything is about barbecuing. This was one of my favorite bands that I saw, I believe it was the second day. They came on stage, just the two of them, one playing bass, one playing guitar, and they had a smoker in between them that was pouring out smoke. They were even rocking aprons, and they just went to town, and people were going nuts for them. In fact, I think this band even had like a cook-off with Mutilation Barbecue. So yeah, both the barbecue bands got together and barbecued. That's just awesome. But yeah, I dig both of these. This one is notably a lot more raw sounding, like the guitars are so damn thick and down-tuned and they almost kind of blend in with the bass, but man, the riffs are just great and it's just hilarious. Like, the opening track is the title track, and it's not a song, it's a skit, essentially, and it's absolutely hilarious. I only wish I wrote down some of the lines from it, but I didn't. But I was laughing my ass off right before it goes into Goat Smoker and just tears your face off, and then slow smokes it and serves it to its friends. But this band loves peppering in samples. There's samples from like Tommy Boy, King of the Hill. I think there's even one that trolls vegans on, let's see, which one was it? De-Veganized, that's definitely the one. Bacon Basher actually has the whole sample that Burgess Meredith had talking about having bacon at every meal in Grumpy Old Men. I fucking love that movie. But yeah, for the most part, this is just riff and chug and groove and fun. But you do get like some stuff that's a little bit different. You do get some more like distant atmospheric melodies on Grill Marks, which definitely features a Letterkenny sample in there. And In Their Darkened Brines. I love these song titles, they're great. But yeah, they're a little bit more creepy and sinister, and there's definitely like emulating different bands as well. Like, it's kind of, you know, got that whole like Cannabis Corpse sort of vibe where some of the song titles are reworkings of, you know, just song titles from other bands, but you know, you gotta throw a little bit of barbecue seasoning on it. The big surprise on here for me was the cover of Executioner's Tax, originally done by Power Trip. They do a solid job on it. I think the guitars might be a little too down-tuned and muddy to kind of give it that thrash crunch, but overall, solid fucking cover, solid album. But this one, I think, is kind of an improvement. First off, the guitars have much more crunch to them, and the bass and guitars are separated better. The drum machine program sounds a little bit cleaner too, and they pretty much just do everything that they do on this album, but I think maybe just like a little bit better. They definitely get a little bit outside of the death metal aspects too, like Sons of Northern Breakfast is notably more black metal. I like the colder, icier riffs, and it's a pretty solid parody-ish. I don't know, it's just good. It's just fucking good. Same thing with Hell Hath No Fury, which is just more of a thrashy, up-tempo fucking banger on here. Yeah, both these albums rule, and they illustrate something else that I love about metal is levity, a good sense of humor. You gotta be a little bit more self-aware about how ridiculous metal can be and just sort of embrace it. And, well, this band definitely has, and it's absolutely awesome. The tunes are just fucking rippers. Both of these albums are sick. I would definitely want to find more by them. And hopefully this band comes up to the Toledo area and just tears shit up here, because I really want to see these guys live again. Both of these are killer. If you're looking for something ridiculous and heavy and you're a big fan of Fulci especially, like it's definitely in that vein in terms of the music, check this band out. They rule. And finally, we have Tankard, Zombie Attack. This is the debut album from these beer-loving thrashers from Germany. I mean, I don't think any of them drink now anymore. Well, they probably drink like the non-alcoholic stuff, but you know, whatever. You got to keep up with the themes because this band loves beer. Now, it wasn't as apparent on this one because, you know, the album cover is actually yeah, well, I don't think there's a beer on there. And it seems like literally every album cover that Tankard has, there's always a beer on it. There might be a couple that don't, but most of them definitely do. But yeah, I've been a fan of this band for a while, and when I saw this one, I had to snag it up. And this is just high-octane 80s thrash. It's fast, it's fucking goofy, but it's also like aggressive and mean. Like the song Acid Death, I think is one of the best songs they've ever written. It also sounds like the frontman saying Exodus in there, which is totally fitting because it kind of sounds like an Exodus song. Maniac Forces is another big standout. I like the synths and guitars sort of doing that interplay and creating some spooky atmosphere. And of course, like the beer-oriented songs like Alcohol. Alcohol is a fucking rager, but Empty Tankard, that is still possibly one of my favorite Tankard songs. I mean, it was probably the first one I ever heard by them, so that one's always just kind of stuck with me. It's just a good rager of a song. Now, I know when it comes down to like the Teutonic 4, like this band kind of gets looked down on. In fact, I've heard people say it's the Teutonic 3 and they just kind of skip Tankard altogether. But I like this band, and I think one of the things that stands out for this band versus, say, like, you know, Creator and Sodom and Destruction is they embrace more of that Bay Area sound versus like the Teutonic sound, which really felt kind of more based on Slayer and then definitely like proto-black metal. This band really didn't have that phase. A lot of the stuff I feel is more similar to like, you know, Bonded by Blood or Kill 'Em All. Like it's just fast, it's kind of punky, it's a little bit loose, and you know, this band was definitely the one out of the Teutonic 4 that added a lot of levity to their songs. I still need to get more Tankard in my collection, but I mean, so far this is probably my favorite one that I have heard. And you know, the other ones I have, like, there's definitely some weaker ones, but I do want to get more of their stuff. I know like some of the albums after this are really good too, and then there's a bit of a drop off, but you know, that happens with long-running bands. But yeah, if you're a fan of thrash and beer and goofy 80s horror movies and those sort of things, definitely check this out. This is a solid debut. And that'll do it for this one. This is probably another obscenely long one. And yeah, I got one more stack that I'm working on, and then I will be caught up until I go out and buy a shitload more stuff once again. There's a really good chance of me doing that, to be honest. I mean, you guys probably already know by now. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon if you'd like to help us out there. There is a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel, but thrallsmetal.com is where you go to get some Thralls merch. We have t-shirts, we have older t-shirts on discount, we have hats now, so if you're looking for any of that stuff, that is exactly where to find it. And of course, thank you guys so much for liking, subscribing, following, all that shit. It means the world to us. Tons of content coming. By this point, who knows? I think the Judas Priest ranking is probably done and up, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if not, I'm sorry about the delay once again, but I'm reasonably sure it's up by now. Still got plenty of new releases to go over. Looks like November is going to have some key releases as well. So yeah, tons of stuff coming in the future. So once again, thank you all, and we will catch you later.